Merhabalar, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Öğleden sonraki ilk oturum yemek sonrasında. Umarım ilginizi çekecek konularla sizi canlı tutacağız. Bana bu paneli İngilizce olarak yönetmem gerektiği söylendi. Zira konuklarımız 3 tane farklı ülkeden. Türkiye'den Uğur hocamız var. Kendisi Edinburgh Üniversitesi'nde. Pierre Hazan, Cenevre'den aramıza katılıyor. Bir de Bosna Hersek'ten Mustafa Bey bizimle olacak. Dolayısıyla üçünü birlikte İngilizce'de buluşturabileceğimiz için panele İngilizce olarak devam edeceğim. Now I'd like to invite the panelists to the stage, please. Pierre Hazan. Uğur Özdemir. Yes, please. And then Mustafa Cerić will be joining us from Bosnia Herzegovina. Can you hear us, Mr. Cerić?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome to our panel. If you can hear us.
Teşekkür ederim.
Hoş geldiniz.
Hoş bulduk.
During this panel, we will try to explore the concepts and the transition processes in any given conflict resolution process. And before we start with the introductions of Pierre and Uğur, I would like to say a couple of things myself. And I want to make reference to the first panel and the panel's Bekir Ağırdır, when he was talking about this interesting mood in society right now in Turkey regarding this process, which we can't even name as a peace process or a solution process. Because the officials who are involved in this process are refusing to call it a peace process or a resolution process, let alone spelling the word out democracy. So it's an interesting sort of conceptualization that we are now facing as society. And why I wanted to remind you of what Bekir Ağırdır said about the mood. The majority of society right now is kind of indifferent to the process. They are just watching and observing, not very much excited, even by hearing the word peace, but also not really opposing because they don't really know what's going on. That's why, as a journalist, I really find it important settings like this, and I believe it's probably one of the few that has happened since the first days of October 2024, that now we are having different parts of civil society in Turkey being present in the same room, at least trying to analyze and understand what's going on, with reference also to the international examples around the world. But I also, as a journalist, it's kind of like my probably professional side, I was trying to understand if there were any officials from the governing party and their coalition partner in the room, because I know they were invited from the ruling Justice and Development Party and the Nationalistic Action Party. And then I've been told that there is no one observing this panel or today this discussion. And I would like to note it as a disadvantage of the whole framework in Turkey, which also takes me back to what Bekir Ağırdır said. At this point, we don't yet know if they want to hear what we ought to say as civil society. Maybe we will get there, but this has yet to be seen. And now I'm coming back to you, Pierre. Maybe a few words about you. You're a former colleague, you're a former journalist, but you've been working as a mediator and the supervisor to several peace processes, conflict resolution processes all around the world. You're now involved, a few of them still. If you want to name them, the work you had done before, please do that. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about the processes that you were involved. And I also would like to add for our audience that you are a senior advisor at the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. Maybe you can start by defining the role of your organization in any conflict and the role as a mediator and senior advisor of yours. Then I know you're going to talk about the concept of, which is very important and which is key in these processes, the concept of transitional justice. Floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Ekopolitik and DPI for having me. And in this very important discussion you are having in this country at this specific time. Obviously, you are embarking in an uncertain journey, and that's full of hope, and I hope that they will do materialize very soon. You asked me to speak about transitional justice, and there are a lot of people in this room, I'm sure they don't understand what the words mean, transitional justice. I mean, the terms are not very clear, I have to admit myself. What is transition? What does it start a transition? Is Turkey or Syria in transition? Syria, obviously. Is Turkey in transition? I'll let you to judge. What about justice? And having these two words together, transitional justice. So basically, the concept is pretty simple. It means that trying to move from a divided society, an oppressed society sometimes, to a more coherent, democratic, and pluralistic society. And I think it's important to understand how this concept came to be born. And it happened in Austria in 1992, right after the beginning of the end of the Cold War. Why? Because there were more than 20 countries, people from 20 countries belonging to the left, to the center, and to the right, people coming from Latin America, fighting the military regimes, right-wing military regimes. There were people from Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, fighting the communist regimes. And there were people from South Africa and from other African countries fighting apartheid. And apparently they have nothing in common, but they did one thing, the concept of transition. And we're asking the same question. What does it mean? How do we do that? How do we move from an oppressed and divided society to a more democratic society? And how do we establish a new social contract? How do we create a more pluralistic society? So basically, we're struggling with the same question. What do we do with the past in order to create a better future? So that was the real question about transitional justice, and that's how the term was created. So in the next few minutes, I would like to discuss about the basic assumption of transitional justice, trying to explain how it works and the basic tools, and maybe reflect more about your own situation and maybe Syria or other countries. So the basic assumptions is, since ancient in Greece, there was the concept that when terrible things happened, you tend to forget and forgive. You have a concept of amnesia. And for centuries, in the Peloponnese War, there was already the concept of amnesia which was being used. So you tend to forget the past by introducing the concept of amnesty in law and amnesia. So social and political forgetting and forgiving. And you see, for centuries, we had this approach. With the concept that silence is healing. And suddenly, after World War II, after the development of international humanitarian law, after the development of psychoanalysis, there was a reversal of approach with what happened in Salzburg in Austria, with all these people coming from the different part of the world. And we're saying just the opposite. We cannot continue to forgive and forget. We need to remember. So memory is very important. If we want to build a better future, we need to have a memory of the wrongs which happened in the past. So if you want, it was a revolutionary changes in the way we approach crimes of the past or repression or oppressive regime. So when you put the concept of memory, what very soon comes is the demand for justice. And the question is, what kind of justice? And here we are thinking about justice not being reduced to a kind of retributive justice, prison basically, sanctions, criminal justice, but something much broader. So basically, transitional justice is trying to use different tools to deal with dealing with the past, but also to build a present and a better future. So what are these tools? I think these tools, you can define them in terms of rights. The right to truth. Truth is part of justice. But the question is, what kind of mechanism are you approaching truth? And you see that countries have used different tools. South Africa used Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But it's Germany or Czechoslovakia or Poland, they use to open the archives. In Argentina, what was really important is to find the missing people. So it was about the missing people. So you see that you can use the concept of truth and try to elaborate, given your own situation in your own country, what is the best appropriate mechanisms in order to deal with that. Then you have sometimes criminal justice. There are certain crimes which cannot be amnestied, international crimes, for instance. So you can use it. And then you have a concept of reparations. And reparations could be very, very vast, could be individual, could be collective, could be community-based, could be symbolic. Think about Germany trying to apologize after World War II. Think about Morocco or Guatemala trying to give reparation to some specific communities which have been repressed. We can think about right to health to people who have been tortured. So you see here, you have a lot of different tools to deal with the concepts of the rights of reparations. And then you have the concept of the right of non-repetition to ensure that you're not going again to repeat what happened in the past. So you will introduce, possibly in the Constitution, like in South Africa, new rights in the Constitution and guarantees of human rights. You can use, like in, let's say, Central African Republic, a process of reform of the security, the social security sector, and so on and on. So you have a lot of tools which can be used according to your specific situation. Which brings me to my third point, is what kind of model there are so many different models, dozens of countries have been using the concept of transitional justice. But the way Canada has been using it to deal with the native Indians has nothing to do what's going to happen tomorrow in Syria, because obviously the situations are radically different. So the question, I guess, possibly for you today in Turkey, if you want to embark on the road of transitional justice, what kind of tools do you want to use? Are you going, because you can also use all these tools on a progressive manner, not all in the same time, because sometimes the society is not ready to use all of them in the same time. Sometimes you can inject some elements of it until the maturity of society has evolved and you can continue on the democratic journey. So that's also part of the discussion. So some of the traditional questions in many countries is when you want to use transitional justice, what kind of period are you going to look at? And that's a very difficult question because if you take, let's say, the end of the Ottoman Empire, it's one way to reflect about the journey of your country. If you reduce it to a more limited period, you will end up with a different understanding of what's happening. It depends on what you want to look at, on what specific periods, and what kind of tools you are going to use in order to reach the end of a journey that you want. That also needs a lot of reflections and a lot of discussions, which brings me to my final point. My final point is the most important. It's not the mechanisms, it's what's happening within the society. It's the social truth, the dialogical truth, the discussion that the state and the society with all its different components, with all its contradictions, can have in order to discuss what kind of society we want to live in, for what kind of future also we want to walk to. I will stop here.
Thank you so much. I think this was a great start to the debate and the other things that we'll talk about. Thank you so much. I'll have further questions after the other panelists. Uğur Özdemir, Uğur Hocam. It's always a pleasure for me to get together, talk, and announce Turkish academics that are traveling the world and representing the Turkish academia elsewhere. And now you're teaching at the University of Edinburgh.
Correct, yes.
Very, very good to see you here in Istanbul today and trying to define the limits of this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And as Pierre was talking, the society aspect for that transition is very, very important, especially in a country like Turkey, where political polarization is at its best for the last decade. Well, Turkey is not unique in that sense. I mean, we are talking about the same problem for even the United States today.
Absolutely.
But coming back to Turkey, it's really important to talk about this lifestyle-based polarization, which is still happening in Turkey. How this would apparently affect a so-called peace or solution process of any sort, and how to escape this identity-based polarization, what needs to be done. I think we're going to hear some tips from you today.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Cansu. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. And you're exactly right. So the point where Pierre left is exactly the point I can begin. I'm an academic, so we can't live without slides. So that's number one. So I wonder if I can have slides. So I will talk about polarization. I will try to give a brief on polarization, the conceptual sort of framework around polarization, the theory of polarization, as political scientists today talk about it. I'm an academic. I mainly work on political psychology and political behavior. I use experimental methods. I work with individual level data, with experiments. So what we try to do is basically try to understand how people make decisions, how people form ideas and emotions. So I'll try to do that. And the second rule of academic life is you never get the slides on time. The clicker doesn't work. I think we are going to these stages now. Okay. Let's wait then, shall we? Is that okay? Can we move on? I wonder if I can have my slides. Slide'ları alabilir miyiz efendim? Size verdiğim. Okay, so let me while the slides are coming, let me begin what you said, Cansu. Is polarization is not an issue about Turkey, about Turkey. I'm still trying to adapt to that. So it's one of the most pressing challenges of today's world. And when we talk about polarization, we used to talk about polarization in terms of ideational or ideological polarization up until 2000s. But starting from 2000s, yep, that's me, and that was the title of my talk. I have the thing here. But when we talk about polarization now, we talk about three different forms of polarization. And so ideological or issue-based polarization was one thing. It's the good old, you're a left guy, I'm a right guy kind of distinction, right? But political scientists have realized that this is not what is the most important form of polarization now. Emotional-based polarization, what we call affective polarization, start to become the norm. So we don't just disagree, we hate each other, right? So that's a different thing. You know, we might not agree on a certain point, right, on a political point, but hating from someone is something else. So this emotional hostility towards opposing groups started to be the dominant form of polarization, and that's one of the hottest topics in comparative politics these days. So why is affective or sentimental polarization a bad thing? Well, you might think polarization is not inherently a bad thing, because a disagreement in democracy is something you want, right? Because it fuels accountability, it fuels debate, but at the end of the day, why do we like democracy? What is good about democracy? Well, we believe it's a competition of ideas, right? People will compete on ideas, politics is a marketplace for ideas, and we will make a selection that's best for the society. But what if the electoral competition is not taking place on ideas, but it's taking place on emotions or identities? Why should I like elections then? What is good in elections for me? It's not going to bring up solutions, it's just going to bring up polarization, right? So this distinction between ideational polarization and identity or emotion-based polarization is really the key. And countries like Turkey are unfortunately going through an emotional or identity-based polarization. This emotional core of polarization is something we really should need to think really hard about. Dignity is one of the key words, for instance, right? So what is dignity? So this is, there is this ancient Greek word, timos. It's that people want to feel recognized and valued, right? People want to be recognized. They want to exist. It has nothing to do with, you know, having economic resources or having a status in the society or not. They want to be valued as they are, as who they are, right? That's part of their need pyramid, right? So, and this dignity is something we should highlight. That's one key word. When we think about polarization in society and conflict in society, something we cannot leave aside, right? So Turkey, with its all collective traumas, historical grievances, we all have historical grievances. We all come from different backgrounds, right? We have stories of victimization, right? So recent political tensions, these emotional and psychological dimensions are already there. And if we fuel those through identity politics in the politics stage, we will only create problems, more and more problems. So this was my first point, right? The second point is the distance between you and I, two individuals, is not unidimensional. I am from Sivas, I am a Fenerbahçe fan, I vote for this party, I'm a male, whatever. So these are all multidimensional, we are all multidimensional human beings, right? And the distance between two individuals is multidimensional. And that's a good thing. Because if I can't agree with you on Fenerbahçe and Galatasaray, I might agree on being from Sivas. It opens a venue for compromise, right? But if there is a partisan identity which summarizes all of my other identities, that's what we call a partisan sorting. Tell me which party you are voting for, and I'm going to tell you who you are. If that happens, that is the most dangerous form of polarization. Because all other identities disappear, and the room for compromise disappear. We can't start talking because we have categorical boundaries. So my second point is this partisan sorting, and why is it dangerous? And this is what's happening in Turkey as well. And another third point, unity is a myth. Shared identity, forcing a shared identity never worked, will never work. So there are zillions of examples of centralized identity-driven narratives that failed, right? We shouldn't try to impose a shared identity. We should try to learn together with our distinct identities. Let's create a big identity under which we can all fall in. It's never going to happen. We can go back to the identity dignity in this point. It's not going to work. It's a myth. And I have 5 observations here. I'll just try to quickly go over. This is a huge topic. This is a huge literature, and it's impossible to summarize it. But if I want to summarize it in really 5 short points, the first thing, polarization is a symptom. It's not the disease, right? So you need to understand what's going behind the scenes, right? So it reflects deeper structural, emotional fractures in the society. And we need to be brave in order to question what those fractures are. And trust is the foundation. It's not the shared identity. We are never going to share the exact identity. We have multidimensional identities. We will never agree on a single identity. But we can trust each other. That is a different goal. Right? Emotions are more powerful than logic. Not all polarizations and the important parts of polarization are happening on an emotional scale, not on ideational scale. Compromise is painful but necessary. We have to learn how to live together. We have to learn how to agree to disagree. And the 5th point, I'm an academic, and unfortunately, and this is where Ekopolitik hopefully will come into point, because there is a huge knowledge deficit. Our social sciences are not producing enough raw material for the society to proceed and to digest. We need more serious empirical works. Civil society should step in. Academia should step in. And we need to produce rigorous, methodologically sound empirical studies to understand how people think, how people react, how people hate. If we don't do that, we will be sticking to those TV shows that starts at 9 p.m. I'm sure for all the journalist friends here, but they're nonsense. And people think that these people are talking about social scientific stuff and they're experts. No, they are not. This is not what science is. There is a huge knowledge deficit, and serious social scientists should be in the picture. 2 points. So what's the roadmap? Well, the roadmap is lesson 0, which we should have started 20 years ago. prioritize research and knowledge-driven interventions in coalition building. We have to be smart. We have to look at other examples. What happened? We need data-driven solutions, not speaking from your gallbladder, right? Second, we need to admit polarization exists without denial or panic. We shouldn't say, you know, we are all together, living a shared identity. No one can divide. Stop lying and admit what's happening. Otherwise, you will never get anywhere. It's like you have a huge tumor in your brain and you say, oh, it's my brain growing. We need to normalize dignity. Dignity is the key. We need to understand people, be serious about it. And we need to focus on structural reforms over superficial fixes at the narrative level. The fixes we came about with is all at the narrative level, right? Türk-Kürt kardeştir, bizi bölen kalleştir is never gonna work. It never worked. Exactly. So it relies on a long battle. And we need to start from small, right? So we need to be humble about it, right? So you can try and start from above, which might be needed, but the long-term consequences of reconciliation can only happen if it starts from the grassroots. Personally, that's why I'm here. I was born and raised in this country, and I feel a responsibility. And if I can add a pinch of salt to this soup, however small it is, I will be happy. 2 last sentences, Cansu, if I may. Polarization is like a fire, right? So when controlled, it can warm a democracy. And when left unchecked, and when it's used for electoral competition, then it can burn down the whole house. And I'm worried, or you can use the pressure cooker analogy, it's the same thing. When people left ignored, they become entrenched in their identities, Cansu, right? And people feel ignored. Right? Oh, but they don't have to right to feel ignored. It's feeling, my friend. It's not about rationality. If they feel that way, then they feel that way. You have to deal with that fact. Right? And we cannot convert each other. We don't have to convert each other. We just need to learn to live together. That was my final sentences, Cansu, if I may.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to turn to, with the technical team helping me out here, can we switch the screen to Mustafa Bey in Bosnia, please?
Hello.
Sayın Cerić, we're back to you. You're on the screen now, and all our audience is looking at you. And I wanted to remind the audience about your most known and previous hat as the Grand Mufti of Bosnia during a very difficult and painful process in your country. And if you can tell us about the emotional aspect of this nation building while coming to terms with the polarization in the former Yugoslavia, and why it was so painful, and what did the civil society and the political institutions do to overcome the ghosts of the past?
Well, thank you, Madam Moderator. İyi günler, good morning or good afternoon. And I am physically not with you face to face, but my heart is with you. and congratulations to the organizer of this conference. And especially, I am very much impressed by the idea of ecopolitics, because politics is polluted very much more than the natural world. So it needs clearance. And as somebody said, that politicians don't know how to tell the truth. The priests are supposed not to tell the lie, and some journalists don't know to make the difference between the two. So this is the world that in which we live, and this is my experience of the war in Sarajevo or in Bosnia. As you know, Sarajevo was under siege 1,425 days. And during this time, of course, my experience is too long to tell you. And I am trying to overcome some of these memories. And of course, some memories I keep in my mind. Therefore, allow me here to say something on this occasion, especially after I was hearing these two great professors, academicians, who enlightened me a lot, especially the last reflections on what is going on in Turkey, because we in Bosnia are looking at Turkey, whatever is happening in all aspects of life. So I would like to share with you some of my reflections or my thinking these days, what is happening in the world, because we live in a global world where we are all part of the destiny of this planet, whether we like it or not. And as I am watching this with my experience of Bosnia these days, I have noticed that somebody has already noticed that there have been 10 conflicts to watch in 2024. So the world today is in fiery conflicts, not in the reconciliatory post-conflict agenda. And I know both the war and reconciliation. More leaders today are pursuing their ends militarily, more believe they can get away with it. More world states and societies as well are being trained for the art of war rather than the art of peace. More people are being indoctrinated for the holy war rather than the holy peace. More military doctrines are being composed on the idea of just war rather than just peace. By the way, the first book regarding war-peace issues was not written about the art of peace, but about the art of war by the Chinese author Sun Tzu. Thus, since 1,000 years, man's mind has been occupied by the idea of war rather than the idea of peace. Should I remind you, as Philip Bobbitt has already elaborated in his excellent book, The Shield of Achilles, War, Peace, and the Course of History, that the conventional wisdom of the Western world, derived from Kant through Jeremy Bentham, proclaimed by Woodrow Wilson in 1918, and implemented by Frank Roosevelt in 1945, was that war was a condition of international disorder that should and would be remedied by the development of international law and enforced by the appropriate courts on the model of those prevalent in Western world. On that basis had been created the whole apparatus of the United Nations and world courts on which we allegedly depend today for the maintenance of international order and which quite manifestly fails to provide it. However, Bobbitt continues to educate us in 19th century Germany, a very different analysis had been developed by Hegel and his disciples. The state, they pointed out, was created only by law, but the state, they pointed out, was created not by law, but by war. Since the state was not only the highest, but the sole creator of legitimacy, self-preservation was the state's first duty and the primary concern of its citizens' alliance. As the state had come into existence through war, so it could only survive and express itself through war. This philosophy was to shape German policy in the first half of the 20th century. Thus, Bobbitt concluded, if Germany had won the two world wars, the subsequent settlement would have been the stamp of Hegel rather than that of Germany or Jeremy Bentham. As we know, Hegel's Germany had not won either of the two world wars, and consequently, the world has lived for the last 8 decades in the shadow of Kant, Jeremy Bentham, Woodrow Wilson, and Frank Roosevelt's notion of the international law and order for the sake of world peace and security for all. Not to speak about my own experience of genocide in Bosnia, but I would like to share with you today a bitter shock of an utterly collapse of almost all the principles and mechanisms of preventing genocide in Gaza, Palestine. There cannot be any excuse of anyone in the world for not doing what should have been done to stop genocide in Gaza. The slogans such as human rights, the Security Council of UN, the World Court of Justice, as well as the noble idea of humanism, have entirely lost their supposed meanings. Everything imaginable to be human and decent has been broken in Gaza, and everything possibly thought to be sane has been brutally trampled on in Ukraine and Sudan. Hence, today we live in the shadow of Hegel's legitimacy of war for the supremacy of the holy state, rather than the legitimacy and supremacy of the holy divine law and the sacred human rights to life, faith, freedom, property, and dignity. Indeed, we live today in a post-truth time, whereby political leaders are less influenced by the factual information than by their emotions or by their beliefs and prejudices they already hold. We live today in a post-justice time, whereby a conviction of unconditional discharge is maintained, which means that a court decision is sparing the rightly convicted man any jail, time, fines, or prohibition. We live today in a post-reconciliation time, whereby a retaliation is a legitimate way for a victory over an imagined or real enemy. We live today in a post-peace time, whereby the war is the rule of the game in international, intercultural, and interfaith relations. Sure, the way out of this world chaos is a must way towards the terms of justice, of truth, justice, reconciliation, and peace in global affairs, as well as in human decency based on common sense of humanism, which is losing its ground because it has lost its spirit, its soul, its heart, and its mind. Hence, there is today a desperate need for a spiritualization of humanism, as Giovanni Pico della Mirandola had the need to humanize religion at his time in Europe. Thus, the humanism needs back its real spirit, soul, heart, and mind, provided that man is not already out of his mind. With
Mustafa,
these thoughts,
Mustafa Bey,
I am grateful.
can you hear
for-
me? Sorry to interrupt. If you can just round up your final comments, because I also would like to invite the members of the audience to engage in the discussion. So if you can just briefly.
I just finished my points, just to say,
Yes, please. Thank
with
you.
these thoughts, I am very glad to share with you hope that genocide in Gaza will stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your contribution and comments. And if you have time, please do not leave, so that maybe further questions might be posed to you, or you'd like to add some comments later on. But if you have other undertakings and obligations, of course we understand. Thank you so much for your time. Now, with your permission, I'd like to turn to the audience, and if they would like to follow up this discussion with their comments or questions, please feel free. Please. Can we extend the microphone to? And it would be great if you can introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
Hello, merhaba, iyi günler. My name is Ryan Sadi. I used to work in the Royal Court in Jordan for the past 20 years in the political office. And I have a question for Mr. Uğur here regarding the emotional side of this polarization. Now, once the states or governments lost the dominance on information, I mean, whether, with the internet era, politics resorted to a lot of the emotions, and we're seeing that like in the politics. But isn't that the natural instinct of humans? Because in marketing, in commercial world, they work on emotions to sell you something. So isn't this the natural route that now that we've gone into? And if that's the case, then does politics evolve to, take that into consideration, given that, that's the instinct that even in marketing it works on? And if that's the case, how do we deal with this? I mean, people talk about, instilling, let's say, internet literacy with kids. So when they look at information, they can evaluate it for what it is before they just take it point blank. So I'd like to hear your perspectives on that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the million-dollar question, or the big elephant in the room, because it can go both ways, right? So the emotional manipulation can go both ways. And as you said, the informational structure or the informational environment of where people exchange ideas completely changed. So we are living in the world of echo chambers. You only hear the people that you already agree with. So marginalization is really quick if you are living in one of those echo chambers, because the exponential factor of communication marginalization is really, really high. I suppose we don't have any solutions other than coming up with our own emotional interventions to the system. So that's where the competition is taking place, and there is no way we can get out of this equilibrium in any time soon, right? but we need to go beyond the social or the digital communities, right? I do still believe that the small group grassroots movements can, I want to hope, still matters. Education, as you say, is really, really important, of course, but the identity politics, the rise of identity politics, the pragmatic politicians who would like to capitalize on the existence of these identity politics, and the existence of really high velocity informational flows, I agree, is a very terrible combination. And I think that kind of summarizes what we are going through now as a world. But we need to be smart. That's what I can say, right? So we need to get engaged with our own emotional policies. The rise of behavioral finance, the rise of behavioral politics, the rise of behavioral economics, it's not a coincidence, right? So in terms of interventions, I think we need to be on the same playing field. Is it ideal? I don't know. I don't think. Would a good democracy theorist like this equilibrium? No, but I can't see any way out.
Thank you, Uğur Hocam. Maybe we have further questions from the audience, but Pierre, I would like to ask you one thing about what you said earlier about the different tools that can be used for transitional justice, for the concept, for employing the concept. Coming back to the situation right now in Turkey, many of the other panelists also mentioned that the roadmap and the specifics and the end game, nothing that we know right now. But there is one talk around since the first day, and apparently we understood the whole process started by the sentence of this ultranationalist leader in Turkey when he talked about releasing the leader of the armed group in Turkish prison, who is serving life, by the way, Öcalan. And then he was actually calling out to him and saying that, why don't you come to the Turkish parliament and announce that there's a ceasefire, we are burying the arms, and that's it. So dissolving of the terrorist organization should be announced from the Turkish parliament, which was quite an extreme sort of step from someone like him. Then that's why when we understood as the society, there is something cooking, there is something being cooked by the partners in the ruling alliance. But on the other hand, since that day, which has been more than 4 months now, or 3 months, sorry, we don't really know what other tools will be employed. The only thing we really discuss in the public square is whether Öcalan will be released, put the house arrest, and then maybe there might be an amnesty for the other militants involved. I mean, judging from your previous experience, I mean, this is the only real kind of debate in the Turkish public domain. Would this kind of a Kickstarter be enough for a viable, sustainable process, which you described, and also Uğur described from a psychological perspective, that it's going to be a long one, a difficult one, and many obstacles will be on the way, that's for sure. But then if you, from day one, set the conditions on only the conditions of a one man or the leader, but not really talking about the rest, how do you think this methodology might affect the process itself?
What is, I guess, interesting is something is moving. So you may imply, we may think that there has been some kind of agreement, of deal behind the scene. The question is not so much if it happens, I think it's important. Nevertheless, the real question is what's going to happen within the society. Is it triggering a real change? And the question is not, about a possible elite deal is how the society will get engaged and how the state will respond to it. So the question is not, and it's basically going to what Uğur was saying, not to have a conversation which is very controlled by a limited number of people, or rather having a much more democratic process. And the question here is basically to which extent your society is ready to engage, is ready to mobilize, is ready to put on the table its demand, and then we'll see, I guess, how the state will engage. And maybe we'll have a name for this process, because so far, as I understand, there is no name. So the question of labeling is very important, because behind it, there is some kind of project. And we can also imagine the absence of name as a kind of balloon testing the water. And the question then is the society able to fill in its demands and give some direction which will fit to some democratic agenda?
Sort of a name. They're calling it a terror-free Turkey. Terörsüz Türkiye. Terror-free Turkey. Turkey. But they are not really referring to any kind of solution or resolution or the democratic project or a peace process or a conflict resolution process. There's no reference to that. That's only called Turks and Kurds are brothers, and the name of the project is Terror-Free Turkey. So what does it tell, like, what does it imply for you?
You can have different levels of interpretations. You can think you want one side, the minister wants to appease some part of its population and send the right signal to it, say, don't be afraid. Or it could be a real agenda. So it's very difficult to have a clear view of what's happening behind the scene. And what's happening behind the scene is just a small part of what might happen later. I guess in many processes, what's happening is some political operators, they want to do a limited move and they think they can control. The question is, are they able to control? And very often they are not able to control. They think they can. The question is then, is this process being autonomous? Will other stakeholders jump on it and be somehow bring it somewhere else? And that's the interesting conversation to have.
Further questions? Zeynep, please. And please introduce yourself as well.
Hi, this is Zeynep. I'm an academic and also DPI's Turkey analyst. I want to just move forward a bit from what Pierre said, actually, because he said political actors, they may think that they can control the process in a limited way, but I mean, it is difficult to ensure that. So what would be the options? Because what comes to my mind, I mean, in the maybe in a positive, in a hopeful way, we can say that, well, maybe civil society and other relevant actors, they can, really have an impact on the process. And maybe, for instance, if we think about Turkey, like we can move it forward to a more democratic project, maybe. What would be the other option if, like, the political actors cannot control it? I mean, if we think of other examples around the world, what could be the options actually? Thank you.
Could go in many different ways. When we think about famous example, let's think about South Africa. At one point, a lot of journalists were very worried. Mandela was still in house arrest. He was not free. And the journalists came to him and said, listen, if you want to create a new democracy and you want to hang us because we are implementing apartheid policy, we are going to resist, and there will be a bloodbath. And that's how the journalists wanted to resist. And then they find a formula which became the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But it was a give and take. If you give total truth, then you will get total amnesty. which, by the way, is against rule of law and international law, but doesn't matter. There has been a process of negotiations. In other cases, very often, there have been an instrumentalization that in order to, the state wanted to control the events, it was able to control the events because the civil society was not strong enough to resist to this instrumentalization and manipulation. So the question is also a kind of dance. And what I'm very curious personally is how to see how the Turkish society is going to move and how this dance is going to happen and who is going to basically lead the direction. And that's, for me, a very open question.
An open question for all of us at the time being. Any more questions before we close the panel? I know that we are a bit ahead of our time, but we started a little late after the lunch. Please. Buyurun. Buyurun.
Teşekkürler. Bosna Hersek'te çok uzak olmayan bir tarihte etnik, dini açıdan o coğrafyada yaşayan halklar deyim yerindeyse birbirini boğazlıyor iken bugün barış içerisinde bir arada yaşama noktasına nasıl geldiler konusunda böyle ibret alacağımız ya da üzerinde düşüneceğimiz hususları Mustafa Bey izah ederse sevinirim. Teşekkürler.
Mr. Cerić, could you hear the question? Sesini açabilir miyiz arkadaşlar Mustafa Bey? I think you're on now.
Yes.
Did you hear
Can
the
you
question?
translate me because it is in Turkish? I
Mr.
didn't understand.
Mr. Cerić, the question was actually if you could give us some examples of how the Bosnian society overcame the polarization. That was, I mean, I'm briefly summarizing the question. Maybe a few striking examples of how you made it happen.
Well, when people have the will to overcome difficulties, it is very easy. When they don't have this will, then it is difficult. I think after, as I said, 1,425 days of the besiege of Sarajevo, there was a kind of will to make an example in post-conflict time periods that we in Bosnia can relive the thousand year of our life in unity with the diversity. And being at the time Grand Mufti, we started with the reconciliation based on our interfaith dialogue. So yeah, after the Dayton Agreement, the first step was made by the Catholic Church, Jewish community and Orthodox community and myself. So we made the Interfaith Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This move made a kind of way for others to, especially politicians, and then, as you know, the three armies that were fighting each other now are working together. And it was the kind of, I would like to share this idea of logotherapy that was developed by Frankl, who was in Auschwitz experience. So when you are in difficulty, you have to find a way, or you have to develop the will to meaning. I mean, which means that you have the reason you have to find a reason to live and to survive and to overcome. You know, Nietzsche developed the idea of the will to power, and Freud developed the idea of the will to pleasure. But what we are lacking, I think, today is this idea of the will to meaning. So you have to find the meaning of life, and you especially when you are in difficulties, as we have been in difficulties in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. From this experience, you are trying and you must find the will to meaning. And this is how we are getting now, I would say, as an example of, in a very short time, we made the post-war conflict to be an example how it can work. Of course, today we have difficulties. And there is a great debate, public debate about many understanding, and there are always in Bosnia not one truth, but many truths. So I would agree with your panelists that said that we have to learn how to live and how to admit that we agree that we don't agree, and that we have to learn how to make compromises and how to overcome some wounds that we are living. So we had this slogan that was very much powerful, and that is, especially in Srebrenica, I was repeating all the time, we need truth, justice, reconciliation, and peace. Because why truth is on the first list of these principles? Because you may afford some injustice, but you cannot afford untruth. What this disease of today's world all over is the untruth, that those who are powerful, they try to convince you to believe their lies or their untruths. This is not acceptable by your heart. Injustice is all over, but therefore, through the World Court of Justice in Tribunal in The Hague, I think we, the victims of genocide, got some satisfaction that the truth is told about their sufferings. And I would agree with your panelists who said that whether you are small or big, it is not matter of economic. It is a matter of your being recognized, your pain being recognized, because no one has monopoly on pain. And this is, I think, in the Middle East, we have the problem that some people take pain as monopoly. They have the monopoly on the pain, and disregarding the others who have also the pain. No one has monopoly on anything, and we have to share our pain
Mr.
and
Cerić.
our pleasures all together. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best, and I would like you to say hello to my Turkey, to my friends, and I would agree that Turkey free of terrorism and live in peace and security, inshallah, forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mustafa Cerić. Thank you. And we share your hopes for Gaza and for the Middle East as well. Thank you for reminding us of the situation today. Thank you. And with that note, I think I will have to close this panel if there is no further. If very quickly, I'll give the floor to the other gentleman. Beyaz gömlekli beyefendi siz. But if you could be really brief about the question and the comment, if you.
Pierre Hazan Bey'e sormak istiyorum. Şimdi bazı kavramları konuşurken çok dikkatli olmak lazım.
Kendinize tanıtır mısınız onun
Tabii.
açısından?
Devam edebilir miyim? Bazı kavramları konuşurken dikkatli olmak lazım. Yani Türkiye bugün parçalanmış bir ülke değil. Yani biz parçalanmış bir ülke ön kabulünden veya varsayımından yola çıkarak bir takım tahlilleri veyahut da çözüm önerilerini ortaya koymak gibi bir keyfiyetle karşı karşıya değiliz. Bizim esas meselemiz Orta Doğu'da, çevremizde çok acımasız bir şekilde yaşanan çözülme, parçalanma süreçlerine karşı dikkatli olmamız, buna karşı kendi yapımızı nasıl koruyabiliriz sorusuna cevap bulmamız. Yani esas bizim Türkiye'nin, kamuoyunun kafasını yorduğu problem bence esas bu. Yani burada belirli bir zevat, tabii kendi şeyleri açısından, disiplinleri açısından belirli bir tarif getiriyorlar, şey yapıyorlar ama Türkiye'nin kendi coğrafyasında, Orta Doğu coğrafyasında diğer ülkelerin hiçbirisinde elde edemediği bir sürü kazanım var bununla ilgili. Şimdi
Toparlayabilirsek kapatmamız gerekiyor çünkü.
Bu kazanımları da göz önünde bulundurarak bir süreç, bir model üzerinde konuşursak sanırım daha doğru bir yol alırız diye düşünüyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you so much. It was rather a comment, Pierre, but if you'd like to say a few words.
Yes, every society is different. And obviously, Canada is also went through a process of transitional justice, and it's not a divided country, and Morocco as well. Every country is specific, and it's very important that each country find its own model. So I didn't want to imply that there is a general model. I think just the opposite. That's why the historical events in Turkey are so important, and you have the tools and the means to achieve your process the way you want it. The important is what kind of social contract you want to establish to have a more democratic and more pluralistic society, if I understand correctly.
Thank you so much, Pierre, and thank you to Uğur, Özdemir, Mustafa, Cerić, to all the panelists, and to all of you for being with us on a Saturday afternoon. And I hope, thank you Ekopolitik and Democratic Progress Institute for bringing us together. I hope we will have more opportunities like this to come together and to speak up, and everybody can speak their minds, so that this is not only a framework imposed upon the society by a certain government, but this becomes the project of the society itself. And hearing from all the panelists, I think this is the only real way forward, the only sustainable way forward to have more open society dialogue parallel to the one that is now being administered by the government. Thank you for your participation and patience.